Hey, hey, welcome to Film Fanatics and our monthly old classic episode. And this minisode is going to cover the DC month in honor of Batman v Superman. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
So for old classics now, every month we have a different theme, and we each pick a movie, as well as you, the listeners, pick a movie for a listener's choice, and we do them old school style with reviews and grades and all of that great stuff. So this month is DC, and first up was Joe with the Justice League Doom. So let's hear about it.
Well, I think it's an appropriate title. There is certainly some doom involved or felt throughout the movie. But in this one, for you guys familiar with comics at all, it's very loosely based on the popular JLA story, The Tower of Babel, but they kind of switch the villain and the actual plot. But the concept's basically the same, in which a villain, in this case Vandal Savage, learns of the weaknesses of all the Justice League members, turns them on themselves after recruiting several of their iconic villains in an attempt to take over the world. But we learn pretty quickly that it was actually from Batman's files, as he had collected the weaknesses of all of his fellow heroes as a safety precaution, and it's a race to save the day after that point. Now, this movie, I kind of decided to run because I thought it was appropriate with basically the Justice League starting in live action. Get a Justice League tale out there, and I think this one's pretty good. Like most of the DC animated movies, I've got stellar voice acting, voice cast, pretty true to the comics and the characters, of course, good animation. Of course, unlike a lot of the other DC animated movies, I think it's too short. And it really bugs me because there is some good story stuff here, and the strongest story stuff, which thankfully they do capture from the comic it's based on, is that whole idea of the weaknesses of the heroes, taking them out, some of their personal struggles and their drama there, because a lot of it's psychological, some of it's physical, it varies. And of course, the relation of Batman with the other heroes. There's some good stuff there, and there's a lot of good fighting, and it's a fun time. Just, unfortunately, it's a little undercut because it's too short, and I think it does alienate some non-comic book people, because as I was watching it, specifically Green Lantern's story, I had to give Dan some side stuff to say, if you didn't know anything about him and his girlfriend,
other than the movie, I didn't.
You'd be like, what happened? Why is she a bad guy? Why does this bother him so much? It's performed well and it's drawn well, but if you didn't know anything...
I was going to say, woe won't be on to the uninitiated.
So I would say, yeah, if you're not versed to at least moderately in that, you will be confused with some things. But then again, I think it's also made primarily for the fans, so I can kind of take or leave that. Overall, though, I think it's pretty enjoyable. It's solid. It's just not among the best. I leave it with a B.
Okay. I actually really enjoyed this.
Oh, good.
I do agree. I mean, both of your flaws is kind of what I think about it. Number one, it is too short, especially for all of the different characters that are in it. I mean, if it was just a couple of them, all right, but, there's a lot of things going on. I really would have enjoyed a more fleshed out story. And then the other one is just it's really inside. If you're not a huge comic book geek, maybe some of this stuff is lost on you. I do agree, Joe, that it's made for the fans. I mean, they're the ones who are going to really seek it out.
True.
And since it was, I assume, direct-to-DVD.
Correct.
It's not like you're going to be at the multiplex looking at the titles and saying, oh, Justice League, all right, and going in. I mean, you're obviously buying this or renting it or whatever.
True.
With the intention of knowing what's involved. So I can't take off too many points for that, but I do agree that those are the two stumbling blocks. But I think the voice acting is great. Nathan Fillion, of course, I love. Tim Daly, one of my favorites, and Conroy as Batman.
People have been doing it forever.
Yeah, I mean, these
Naturally.
are, the basic crew. So I like that. I'm actually a tick above you. It's a B+ for me.
Good. Justin hates it.
Justin?
Or loves it. It could be either.
Well, gentlemen, this is sort of encapsulates my greatest fear of the DC animated universe. With only 75 minutes maximum for their films, eventually they're just going to become these bloated, overlong action sequences with a little fraction of story thrown in there. It's the reason I fear the fact that they made the Killing Joke a movie, and this one is no exception to that rule. Doom has a really interesting idea, but the problem is the context comes so late in the game that there's absolutely no time within 75 minutes to ever fully explore it, and one character's logic near the end makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
It's the idea, the possibility that they could take him down.
I mean, it's one of those statements that sounds really poignant and smart until you think about it.
Hey, Justin, in all fairness, that was only 7 of them. The Justice League consists of like 100 people. So, somebody could take them down.
But I mean, for me, this was just... It had some really cool ideas. It didn't have nearly enough time to play with them. The lack of character development sticks out like a sore thumb. The animation's good, and the action is fun. But I need some substance with my style, and I only got so much out of this. I leave Justice League Doom with a C.
Well, I would say that, I guess speaking to the idea that it is pretty inside, these are characters because this is kind of spiritually a successor to all the, DC animated stuff. So, I don't know if I'd say that the character development was absent, but since it didn't bother Dan
I didn't
too
say
much,
it was absent, I just said it was minimal.
Well, yeah, obviously pretty minimal. That's why I want to ask Dan, well, how do you feel about that?
I mean, here's the thing, Joe. You mentioned we have, 100 characters in the Justice League. I mean, they really focus in this movie on the major players that, unless you live under a rock. I mean, if you haven't heard of, Wonder Woman, just
Where have
die.
you been?
Like,
You should know the basics of her character,
Right.
I mean,
it's all there.
I think the ones that they chose for this are, really the core. I feel like it's sort of like having a similar gripe with the first Avengers movie. You don't know by then who Iron Man is and who, the Hulk is. Why are you even watching the movie? So I see what you're saying, Justin, and I agree that the time compression and the lack of really a general story,
pretty
not so much maybe character development, but the story doesn't get enough time to be
It's very light.
evolved.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that other than the Green Lantern, Joe, which is, I would say, the fringe one of the group.
It'd be
Absolutely.
like what?
Other than, like I said, the Ryan Reynolds movie, which I don't really remember because it was, 4 or 5 years ago when I saw it.
Right.
I didn't have a problem with that portion of it.
Well, it's funny. I don't know why a lot of these DC animated movies are so short because...
I think mostly because they want to churn them out yearly, so...
Yeah, but adding on another 15 minutes, I don't know.
That's a lot of animation time, though.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know how the entire schedule breaks down exactly, but
Justice League has a show, though, right?
Not at the moment. That's the thing. They haven't had a show for years.
Oh, okay.
This is all they do.
I was going to say what would make sense is if they wanted to divide the 75-minute movie up into a 3-part episode and put it in the run of the show, that would make sense. But if there's no current show, then it doesn't make sense.
And there's one coming back, so I guess the success of these movies is paying off.
Okay.
And to be fair, that's one of the best things about the show is they could have season-long arcs. So maybe they're not used to working in as condensed a time frame.
that I could see.
Yeah.
And obviously they don't have the same runtime as something like the Avengers, where even if the uninitiated at this point don't have really an excuse, there's still time to give the uninitiated some idea of who these characters are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. You've got 2.5 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
You better
do something.
You better tell them
You have
something.
time, yeah.
Yeah. That's unfortunate it didn't work for you, Justin. That's the lowest grade, I think, so far on this show for any of the DC animated films.
Surprising.
Because
yeah.
you've brought a couple, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
By
think
this
this is
point.
one of the strongest ones, but I really don't think it's bad.
No, I definitely enjoyed it. Well, my pick was V for Vendetta. I wanted to sort of veer off the classic Batman or Superman
Going
sort
the
of theme.
Vertigo route.
Yes, this is, obviously not even DC proper. It's an imprint.
It's meta.
But it's owned by DC,
Yeah.
so I think it still counts. And that is V for Vendetta. This is based on the graphic novel by Alan Moore and David Lloyd. It's a 2006 Wachowski brothers dystopian thriller. Hugo Weaving plays V, an anarchist freedom fighter who attempts to ignite a revolution through elaborate terrorist acts. It was directed by James McTeague, and the Wachowski brothers produced and wrote the screenplay. You've got Natalie Portman playing Evie, a working-class woman who gets caught up in V's mission, and Stephen Rhee plays Eric Finch, the lead inspector on the quest to stop V.
Best known for his role in
The Crying Game. Of course, well, that's the only other thing I know him from, to be honest. I'm sure he pops up, but...
I've seen him in literally maybe 2 other movies other than these two.
Well, but no, listen, I think the greatest strength about this movie is the strong balance that it strikes between crazy and possibly mindless action with this brilliant political and social commentary backdrop. I sort of think of this movie as the thinking person's blockbuster, which
Agreed.
we do get every so often.
Here and there.
But it's rare.
It is.
More often than not, we get London Has Fallen. you know.
Well, it's fitting.
Or Taken 3, you know.
It is.
We don't get a lot of Mensa with our mindless action. I do think there's a fantastic performance from Natalie Portman. I think she really, between this and Black Swan, she was at her peak there in those few years.
Absolutely.
And a strong kudos to Weaving for, you know, doing his entire performance behind a mask.
Because he respects the character and doesn't care about face time.
Well, because I respect that, like Judge Dredd.
I mean,
Or Dredd, I shouldn't say Judge Dredd.
Well, we say no, but
get it straight.
No, really, you got to respect the actor caring that much about the craft and the fans and the story.
Yeah. The only real negative I can say about this movie is as it gets deeper in, more and more explanation is certainly necessary. It's a little bit questionable how much of it makes sense and how much of it is just, let's do an action movie. So that hurts it a little bit, but I think this movie is really, as far as action movies goes, it's a modern classic. I leave it with an A. Justin?
Well, after seeing this movie the third time, I'm officially sort of in the mindset of, will the Academy at some point just give Weaving an honorary Oscar? Seriously, the man is one heck of a character actor, and this is really his crowning achievement.
But Justin, I'd say he's one of those actors who's probably transcendent it, doesn't need it at this point.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
That's what I'm saying, you know.
I mean, even, I know it wasn't critically beloved, but he did a great job in Cloud Atlas as well. But that's a story for another day.
I always forget about him being in it.
And don't forget the iconic stuff, obviously.
Agent Smith, yes, we know.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson.
Which may be the reason why everyone's sort of not entirely able to, like, buy it. Oh, he's this great. He's actually, like, really talented. Matrix was a long time ago, people. But getting back on track after a long tangent.
Listen, this is my favorite movie of theirs, though. I like this more than The Matrix. Matrix is good.
Well, when you said the example of the thinking man's action movie, Matrix would be one that people would go to.
I think that's certainly a good example of one.
But I think what really won me over about this when it came out, and sort of sticks with me now, is it's one of the best instances of an adaptation taking creative liberties with the source material, but executing them surprisingly well. It's thinking about not only what is the story about and keeping that spirit, but finding a way to still convey it as a motion picture. So there are so many that are trying to be 100% faithful, like Watchmen, which I respect for its own merits, but it doesn't necessarily feel like its own entity. And you'll have others that just go so wildly off base that they don't even represent the actual material, and that's a whole different mess. But here we have a really thorough, thought-provoking dystopia. It does get more action-centric than I would say the graphic novel does. The graphic novel goes a bit more in depth. Joe, feel free to stop me at any time.
But that makes sense, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I never read the graphic novel, but I mean, just from a screenwriter's perspective or whatever, or director's perspective, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. But I mean, there are some that would have just said, oh, well, that has to be this, like, completely dramatic satire, and let's forget about it actually being an actual piece of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they find a way to split the difference. There's thought-provoking concepts here, and there's also really thrilling action. And neither one is compromised over the course of the film. You could argue whether or not the cult following over time has kind of hurt it. I would say no.
Yeah, somehow for me it doesn't either. Maybe because it wasn't a Hot Topic type of of fan base.
That's fair.
But I mean, you know, you see the Guy Fawkes masks everywhere, you know, as sort of a symbol for anarchy or whatever. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I don't mind it that much. Mm-hmm. I will confess I saw it when it came out before, obviously, the whole craze started, so that may have played into it. But
could be.
I'm with you, Dan. I think this is an absolutely fantastic movie. Does it get a little action heavy near the end? Yes, but it's the Wachowski brothers, and this is like the last time for them that actually worked. I leave this one with an A as well.
All right, Joe?
Well, I mean, there's not really too much for me to say at this point, so I'll keep it brief.
What a great movie!
It's a great movie. I mean, the only thing that does that keeps it from being like perfect for me is actually I think this idea of an example of the silliness of the superhero movie, which I think is exemplified perfectly in one scene with the whole dramatic dominoes thing. It's a brilliantly shot scene, but the moment you stop to think about it, you're like, wow, that was really a big waste of time just for a really dramatic scene. That is dumb. Yeah, that sticks in my mind. But, you know, that's about as much negativity as I can put towards this movie. So leave with an A as well.
Oh, very good. I assume you've read the graphic novel.
Oh, yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's very different, but I think this one moves so fluidly, though. I actually prefer it, to be honest. I might be the minority there, but... It's true.
No, I mean there are definitely people who support it. I can respect both in their own merits. There's value in the graphic novel. There's value in the movie.
Well,
but I would never confuse the two.
I think the thing about it is I just find this character a little more likable in the movie, and I think a big part of that is just Hugo Weaving's performance. I mean, it's my favorite of his performances, and I think his chemistry with Natalie Portman's great too. It's another one of her great ones. Yeah, definitely one of her best as well. So just a well-directed, well-crafted movie altogether. It's near perfect.
I would really like to see Portman in some good movies again.
Someday, Dan. Someday.
I don't. What's the last thing she even did?
Thor: Dark World.
Other than Thor movies, and she had the No Strings Attached, which I thought was funny. That's right. Earlier this year, we did not review this movie called Jane Got a Gun, so I forgot that existed. But that did not get good reviews at all.
It did not.
Well, to be fair, Natalie kind of peaked very early in her career. So does she really need to do much more at this point?
No, I guess not. I mean, between Amidala and winning the Oscar for Black Swan, and then this sort of in the middle. Mm-hmm. You're right. I mean, I guess she's definitely big. Cemented
unless we forget Leon.
Her place. The professional. That's what I'm saying. I mean, even as like a 10-year-old, she didn't have anything to prove. I don't think so.
All right.
Whatever.
Well,
maybe she's got a career ahead of her, I'm sure. So.
Oh, yeah. Someday.
All right. Well, Justin, let's hear about your pick. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns.
A movie that actually had a runtime.
Yes.
Only because
it's two short movies made into one.
They were like, okay, we'll just chop it the first part into 75 minutes, second part 75 minutes.
It's classic Kill Bill though. It's one movie.
No, it's true. Actually, on that note, listeners, we did watch the complete version, which is a full 150 minutes, which Dan was not happy about, but we'll continue on.
Talk about accurate.
True.
Set in Gotham City a few decades into the future, Peter Weller of RoboCop fame voices an aging Bruce Wayne, now retired from being the Caped Crusader and haunted by his alter ego, obviously being Batman. Though as an old friend, Commissioner Gordon, announces his retirement, Gotham City starts to plunge into chaos, and Wayne seizes his opportunity to return as the titular vigilante amidst the chaos, encountering mutants, thugs, and old nemesis such as the Joker and Two-Face along the way. This isn't my favorite Batman adaptation, but I think with Batman vs. Superman coming out, and one of the main things that sort of was part of the reason they wanted Affleck was they were trying to find an older person to play Bruce Wayne, obviously suggesting the fact that they wanted to take some inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns. Mm-hmm. This was an important one to run, and I really couldn't think of a better opportunity to look at that. It's incredibly dark and very, very, very unpleasant, but the staying power for me personally comes from Weller, who absolutely sells an aging Batman and dealing with the fact that he's not quite up to his prime and having less morals than he had in his youth. I think it does get episodic at times. I think
as was the comic.
Probably more so in part 2 than in the actual main one.
Well, it's broken up into 4 distinct chapters that are chronological and build upon each other, so I can't say it's super episodic. I mean, there's a villain.
No. I understand that. Probably one of the things I found a little bit frustrating is, obviously they're trying to play into the whole Frank Miller, let's look at how the media is responding to this, and unlike V for Vendetta, which is media satire done tastefully and poignantly, this one comes across as sort of heavy-handed, and while I get why it's there and I think it has its place...
That's Frank Miller, though. It's
also very Frank Miller, so I go back and forth as to where exactly he fell off the deep end. But,
that would be 2002.
As they tell me. But the overall story, I think, comes together around the second half. I think part 1 is a bit more episodic than part 2, when we actually focus more on, more of the DC lore, what other heroes are doing. I think the final showdown is absolutely fantastic and has one of the best comic book monologues of all time. Falls into the good, not great. I leave Dark Knight Returns to the B.
All right, Joe?
Well, The Dark Knight Returns is basically the most important comic book ever written. Really up there with Watchmen and Miles.
Does that include Archie and Jughead Double Digest?
Oh, dear.
It's the most important superhero comic
ever
written.
All right.
Though arguably comic in general, because up until this point, in terms of a contained story, before this existed, comics could be dark, but this was the point where comic books are a medium for adults too, and that includes superheroes. That was the graphic novel that is why we're here today. You know, where we are with superheroes, especially all the stuff.
So like Marvel Max and things like that.
Yeah, just grittier, darker, more adult, more mature. Frank Miller's, I'm not going to say he was solely responsible, but he's the guy that's like, boom, this showed up and people outside of comics read it like, whoa.
So he was like one of the movers and shakers.
Yeah, it wasn't kid stuff. So obviously adapting this is a big deal. And I think it was a good choice to divide it into 2 parts and make it really long, because otherwise something would have been lost. And they go through each section, and it's very, very closely following the comic for sure. Now, you could argue that, much like the Watchmen film, it's pretty much just a live-action version of the comic. So, depending on how you feel about that, you might have differing opinions about it. For me, though, I loved it. I mean, the only thing about it that I thought was kind of lacking that leaves the comic being superior is some of the internal monologues are lost, primarily with the Joker. You really get to see more about the Joker's insight, his mind, and most of, actually for both Two-Face and the Joker, the way they're often portrayed now in the relations to Batman, also from that comic. Just really monumental stuff. But Peter Weller was great. I think if we just had a little bit more insight into the Joker's portion of the story, I think nothing would have been lost. But I think it's a nearly flawless adaptation. It was great. It's an A.
Wow. One of the rare instances where the person bringing it is on the lower end.
It happens occasionally.
Yeah, that happens very occasionally. But, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a little bit more with Justin on this than I am with you, Joe. But, of course, I don't have the knowledge of the actual graphic novel comic book to fall back on.
It's pretty much the same.
Well, and that's very cool, because you're right. Usually we don't get to see that. Watchmen, I guess, being one of the few examples.
Pretty much the same.
Which I didn't really care for the Watchmen. But, I don't know. I mean, I think this definitely has its flaws. I think Justin hit on most of them. I do think it's a little bit bloated with the 2.5 hour runtime. But, that being said, I certainly like that it was longer than the typical DC animated 75-minute and out.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, it definitely needs more than that. But I do think maybe
cut it down a little.
Well, yeah. I mean, as a part 1, part 2, obviously you just cut maybe 20-25 minutes out and make it one
2-hour
regular size movie. I think you would be fine. I do think Peter Weller does a good job. I mean, he didn't tell anybody that Dead or Alive they were coming with him. That kind of bothered me. But I guess if it wasn't in the comic, why? Was RoboCop a comic, by the way?
No.
Okay, because I feel like it should have been.
Well, funny story about that. Frank Miller's written some RoboCop comics.
Oh, okay.
Now, RoboCop was actually based on Judge Dredd, and the RoboCop movie was originally supposed to be the first
why he says I am
Dredd
the
movie,
law.
and then it became RoboCop.
Oh,
so that's
interesting. Okay.
So yes, in a way, kind of.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. But yeah, I mean, I sort of am a little bit higher than Justin, but not too much. It's a B+ for me.
All right.
Fair enough.
Joe, your insight on it, comic book wise, is very valuable. I think, because I
Absolutely.
obviously don't know that.
No, I try. No, for really the comic is a big deal in the history of comics. I mean,
but I have to ask you though, Joe. I mean, obviously, Dark Knight Returns, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The sequel comic, not kind of went in a...
Strikes Again?
Well, to put it politely, did not get such a warm reception, but...
Well, Frank Miller has that tendency to be really over the top, and he's not subtle. And his political views are obviously like a linchpin of his comics, and there was obviously a lot of that in this one. But imagine like those little scenes with the reporters and the hokey stuff. Imagine like all throughout it. Also, like his sexism was kept mostly in check in this comic. It got worse progressively.
Oh.
You'll see like his portrayals of female characters are controversial. Also, in terms of fandom, he hates most of the DC characters, so you'll see them treated poorly. But the cool thing I like about that comic is that it's basically the Dark Knight Returns, but Justice League. So you get to see all the characters come back, do things. It's definitely more comic booky and crazier. It might not make as much sense, but I still found it an entertaining read. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people say it is, but it's definitely not at the same level as this.
I guess my question would have been, do you think that would have hurt the overall influence? Because obviously this was a big deal.
You mean of this one?
Yeah.
No, I mean people have issues with Frank Miller, but there's no question he's an incredibly important writer and he's responsible for the modern age of comics. So, I mean, it's like George Lucas. People have their faults, but you can't, ignore the fact he made Star Wars.
So even though 1, 2, and 3 happened, we don't besmirch him because
No. You still have to give him credit where credit's due, despite their faults. I mean, the guy's badmouth Stan Lee. He's not the nicest guy,
No.
but he still made some important stuff. I mean, Sin City also.
Yeah.
And the guy's got talent, or
Oh, yeah.
he had talent.
And, of course, my grade comes with a caveat because for about 4 minutes I had to listen to the movie rather than watch it because the Joker has a big bat in his eye for a lengthy amount of time.
Also from the comics, he fights with...
I'm sure it is.
Well, give the Joker credit for this because he's about the same age as Batman, and he's, going on par with severe injuries.
Yes,
to put it
he
politely.
has severe ocular injuries.
You like the part where you kidnap the kid and the kid's like, Batman's going to get you? He's like, shut up. So you missed that because that was the whole...
I mean, I heard about it. All right, well, let's wrap it up with Constantine. That was our listener's choice from Alex. So, Joe, let's hear about that film.
Well, I prefer to call it John Constantine because people like to say John Constantine. And if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's based on the Hellblazer comics following John Constantine, who is this supernatural detective who has the ability in those comics to summon demons, to fight other demons, and that's essentially what he does. Think of him as like a Ghostbuster, but with more concentrated abilities. This one kind of goes for a slight deviation from that in the sense that he's kind of more rooted in hardcore Christian beliefs. So he committed suicide when he was younger, temporarily went to hell, and is trying to basically buy his way back into heaven by fighting these demons, even though the angels blatantly tell him you're screwed anyway, which makes the whole thing very nihilistic. But that's John Constantine's character in a nutshell. He's not a very happy guy, but he gets the job done, and I think Keanu Reeves is an appropriate casting for it. Kind of, gruff and serious, and it's fine. It's fine. And you got there's this mystery involved where apparently there's the Spear of Destiny, and it's out there, and possibly there's some evil forces moving, and Raquel Weisz might be the source of it, and he kind of has to intermingle with her, and they may or may not have a romance, and there's some cool visuals and some action, and there's a Digimon Hansu.
That's true. Digimon was in it.
Shia LaBeouf is his sidekick. You've got
Tilda Swinton.
Swinton's in it.
You've got Tilda Swinton playing the Archangel Gabriel, and you've got one of the more iconic devils in cinema history. A lot of people like this devil when he finally shows up. So there's definitely a lot of interesting things going on in Constantine. It's one of the rare times I can honestly say that I prefer a movie version of a character that deviates significantly from the comic, and I prefer it over the actual comics themselves. Because, admittedly, I haven't read too many Hellblazer comics, but I don't really find them that interesting. The main difference with the interpretation here is that I guess he's still a bit of a jerk, but his jerkiness is a little more subdued. The John Constantine of the comics is a bit rowdier, a bit more full of himself. There was actually a show that came out recently. It was canceled, but if anybody's curious, that's a more accurate representation of the character and story, which wasn't that bad. But
I was going to say, I knew a couple people who liked it.
Oh, no, I actually enjoyed it, but there are differences to be sure. This one, in terms of the story, though, I think it holds together well enough. I think Keanu Reeves is decent for the character he's playing. I think Raquel Weisz, I like her. She's good. There are some good visuals. But there's a lot of paces where there just isn't much happening. And this is kind of a nitpick, but they go to hell, and their version of hell is pretty cool. But the demons portrayed in hell all look the same. And that bothered me, because one of the cool things about the Constantine comics is every time he summons a demon, it's always really different. It's weird. So you got a little bit of that, some of the demons that pop up, but I just wish there was a little bit more. On the whole, it's okay, but it's actually not as good as I remembered it being. I leave it with a B-.
I didn't care for it.
You didn't seem to.
I thought it was real boring. I thought Rachel Weisz was like just... I'm not even sleepwalking, comatose. I mean, she was awful in this movie.
But she's trying to mimic the awesomeness of Reeves. They got to
Well, and
sleep.
Reeves, I'm sorry, the guy can't act. He can act sometimes. He's like a Nick Cage. Like, for every really great role or performance, he gives us 8 that are terrible.
See, I don't really think this was a bad performance. I just think it was a Reeves performance.
So you're not thinking he's back?
This is not in this. He'll be back in Wick 2, I guess.
But the thing is, if you look at the John Wick character, it's not that much different than this.
It's not, but at least Wick... Look,
Dan,
they killed his dog, and he was on a mission.
The story might have been a little bit more dramatic, but really the performances, if you compare them, are just about the same.
I mean, this to me was like Sweet November Reeves.
But that was so romantic.
No, it wasn't. Here's a secret about my feelings on Sweet November. I wanted them both to die.
Really?
Like a half hour into the movie, so I could leave.
So a month
I need to watch this movie.
Yeah. You've never seen Sweet November?
I have never seen Sweet November.
Honestly. Well, okay, wait, how about this? What about...
The Theron movies that he's not seen.
What about Lake House?
I've actually not seen The Lake House.
See, I thought he was...
But
this is, I just think that's the thing about Reeves. People say he's bad, people say he's good. He's consistent. I think it just depends on how you feel about the movie around him.
I disagree. I think certain movies... You're consistent in terms of his energy level. All right, I'll give you that.
That's true.
But like, there's certain things where I think it is more suited than others.
There you go.
I think it sort of fits into the Nicolas Cage category of when he's more invested in a project, you can see it.
But Nicolas Cage has much more range, I think, than Keanu does.
I agree.
That's not in question.
I agree 100%.
But I'm saying when he's more like when he cares about the project, you can tell.
I think you can tell, but I don't think it's like dramatically different.
I don't think you can tell with Reeves whether he cares or not.
Honestly,
I think it just depends on how the character's written.
If it fits him,
if it suits his,
because he does two things:
mechanical.
Shtick. He does his Neo or he's Ted. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
That's it.
And he's good at both of those.
Yes.
Point break stand.
But everything in between stinks, except for Speed.
I do like him in Speed. He actually had energy, and he played a normal guy. Yeah. He wasn't Reeves yet.
No.
It was weird.
I don't like this film. It's a D+. Justin?
The great missed opportunity that was Constantine. And honestly, after the movie and the show, I'm just asking myself why. And I think after time number 3 watching this movie, honestly, some of the answers I've come up with as far as extremely dark, like the fun factors bar none. And Constantine isn't exactly the most likable. But for me, the biggest offender for this movie is it has far and away the worst sound editing of all time. You will miss dialogue. You will miss entire chunks of exposition. There is...
Yeah, the music's like real loud in some scenes.
You'll get moments where it's okay,
anything.
and then you'll get other moments where you're wondering if they
That's true.
had the boom mic a mile away from the actors.
It's interesting you bring up that problem, because I'm going to say that might be something specific to some people, because I'm a person that I have a problem hearing certain things in movies. That has never been an issue for me in this movie. I had no problem with the sound whatsoever. I liked the fact it was quiet. I thought it was atmospheric.
There's a difference between atmospheric and incompetent directing.
I think you might mean editing, right? Sound mixing, probably more specifically.
Director is still in charge of making sure that everyone's doing their job. So I blame the director, not going back and saying this. There's some issues on the editing front here.
I don't know if I'd blame the director for that, but I do agree there's sound issues.
But alongside that, the film's story has way too much going on. There's at least 5 stories, each one with a lot of promise. Like the way this movie kicks off, I was actually looking forward to it. And then the sort of kickoff story doesn't really go anywhere. We have Constantine's story, which actually starts off really exciting and intriguing, but it's sort of brood, action sequence, brood, until the end of the movie. And then we have Hell Conspiracy story, which is just all over the place and doesn't really know what sort of tone to take. And then we have the whole buying his way into hell bit, which is just... It has a really interesting aspect of hell, which is, I think, one of the upsides of this movie. And I think Reeves is actually doing an okay job. But I feel like this was something that could have worked and just didn't. I leave Constantine with a C.
Well, I definitely liked it less than that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I had as many specific problems with it. I just thought it was boring. I thought the acting was terrible. I do agree the sound, it has issues. And I just didn't find it that engaging. I mean, they could have gotten to hell a little bit quicker.
I would agree.
Well,
I don't think it had to be 2 hours.
We got to find out specifically what conditions we need to get there. Like, is the water hot or cold?
But okay. There was a running joke while we were watching this movie about how he keeps being asked questions and not answering them at all.
That's because his character's just...
it's like he doesn't hear them.
He doesn't care.
Ugh.
I was going to say, I think it falls into the latter.
Maybe both, though.
Maybe both.
He doesn't indicate that he hears them because he's Reeves.
Well, you can never tell from the wooden acting.
That's Reeves' School of Acting.
I understand. I just don't like him. I'm sure he's a very nice person, but as an actor,
He's an oak, man.
I've seen better. Let's just say that. All right, well, that is going to do it for our DC episode for Old Classics. Next month, we've got Spring Cleaning at Justin's behest. We're going to take a look at some films that we've mentioned many times on the show that we have never ended up watching for the show, or maybe in some cases at all. I don't think I've ever seen any of Joe's frequently mentioned films. So we'll see what he brings to the table. So that will be our episode in April. But of course, you can check out our weekly episodes up, and we do the Star Trek series as well, going through the individual Star Trek. So all of